It was January 1943, and the city of Stalingrad was no longer a city. It was a skeleton, bones of concrete and steel rising from snow and smoke. Every street was a scar, every window a wound, every building a tomb for men who had no names left. The Volga River lay frozen like a slab of glass, cracked and white beneath the endless winter sky. Across it, artillery thunder rolled in slow, distant echoes, the kind that never seemed to stop, only pause to breathe. The air itself tasted of rust and ash. Beneath the shattered frame of what had once been a tractor factory, a young Soviet sniper named Viktor Antonov lay prone in the rubble, his cheek pressed to the cold wood of a Mosin Nagant rifle. He hadn't moved in 4 hours. His breath froze in small, perfect clouds. His trigger finger was numb, wrapped in a strip of torn uniform sleeve. And somewhere out there, in the maze of ruined apartments opposite his scope, was another man. One who was watching him just as closely. They hadn't seen each other, not yet. But they both knew. This was not a battle of armies anymore. It was a duel, fought between 2 invisible ghosts in a dead city. The morning had begun like all others in Stalingrad, with silence that felt louder than gunfire. Viktor had been awake since before dawn, shifting positions through the debris. He'd learned that the first rule of survival wasn't marksmanship. It was patience. Whoever moved first, usually died first. Through the cracked scope of his rifle, Viktor watched a shell-blasted courtyard, a burned-out truck, the collapsed fountain frozen solid, and behind it, a row of windows. Perfect sniper nests for anyone smart enough to use them. He didn't know the German's name, but Soviet scouts called him Der Schatten, the Shadow. He was rumoured to be part of a specialised sniper unit under the 6th Army, an expert marksman from the Wehrmacht's elite training schools. 3 of Viktor's comrades had already fallen in that sector, each killed with a single shot to the head. Clean. Surgical. The kind of shot that wasn't luck. It was calculation. So Viktor waited. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. A drip of melting snow from a shattered pipe tapped steadily on the floor beside him. 1, 2, 3. Like a metronome for death. His stomach was empty, his canteen frozen solid. He hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. He was 21 years old. He thought about home, a small village near Kursk. His mother's kitchen warm with the smell of black bread and boiled potatoes. That warmth felt like another lifetime. Here, warmth was a bullet that hadn't found you yet. Then, a flicker. A glint of light on metal in the window opposite. Too clean to be glass. Too sharp. Viktor's breathing slowed. His world shrank to the circle of his scope. He moved his rifle 1 inch to the right, half an inch up. The crosshairs rested on a jagged window frame. No movement, no sound. He waited for the wind. The faintest gust pushed snow from the upper floors. For a split second something shifted. A sleeve, a scope, a shadow. Viktor fired. The crack echoed through the ruins, bouncing off walls and broken staircases. Pigeons exploded into the sky in a cloud of feathers. The echo faded. Then came another sound, a second shot, almost simultaneous. The bullet hit the wall inches from Victor's head, spraying stone fragments across his cheek. The German had fired too, and missed by the width of a fingernail. Both men ducked into silence. Neither had won, neither had retreated. The duel had begun. For the next 6 hours, the city stood still. Only the wind moved, through corridors filled with snow and smoke. Somewhere nearby, soldiers fought over a factory floor, screaming and cursing through dust and fire. But here, in this small pocket of Stalingrad, time froze between two breaths, between two snipers. Victor adjusted his position by inches. He knew the shadow would do the same. Each movement was a conversation without words. A message of intent, answered only by silence. He marked the spot where the glint had been, 2 stories up, northern wall, second window from the left. If the German was experienced, he'd change firing points every hour. If he was arrogant, he'd stay. Either way, Victor would find out before sunset. He wiped frost from the bolt of his rifle, chambered another round, and whispered a single word into the still air. Ya viju tebia. I see you. But he didn't. Not yet. And across the ruins the German whispered the same. The Germans called him Erich König, though most who met him never learned his name. To his comrades, he was simply der Schatten, the shadow. He'd earned the title not because he was unseen, but because wherever he appeared, something, or someone, disappeared soon after. Erich had arrived in Stalingrad 6 months earlier, long before the city became a graveyard. He was 32 years old, a veteran of Poland, France, and the Caucasus. He carried a Mauser Kar-98K rifle with a Zeiss scope, calibrated by his own hands. He trusted it more than he trusted men. Now he lay motionless in the half-collapsed remains of a department store, hidden behind a mound of shattered mannequins and glass. Snow drifted through the broken roof and settled on his shoulders like dust. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. He hadn't spoken in 3. Across the ruins, somewhere between the rusted cranes and burned-out trucks of the tractor factory, he knew there was another sniper. A Soviet. Patient. Precise. And good enough to fire within seconds of him. That, more than anything, unsettled him. König exhaled slowly, his breath clouding in front of the scope. The crosshairs cut across a window frame blackened by soot. The place was perfect. Elevation, concealment, and a clear line of fire. Too perfect. He knew the trick. You never look at your target. You look around it. Movement hides in the edges. He adjusted his focus to the left. A torn curtain, motionless. To the right, a staircase, broken. Below, frost. Still. Then he saw it. A faint indentation in the snow beneath a broken pipe. A melted patch where breath had once lingered. Someone was there, recently, and still might be. He tightened his grip on the rifle. Zweite Etage Nordfenster, he muttered to himself. 2nd floor, north window. He waited. The trick was to become the city itself, unbreathing, unmoving, eternal. To let time kill the other man's nerves before the bullet did. He'd been trained to outweight anything that bled. In the Wehrmacht sniper school at Sossen, they had a saying: "The impatient man dies first." But here, in Stalingrad, patience wasn't a virtue, it was a punishment. Through the haze, Erich could see movement now, tiny, controlled, a shadow behind the window frame. He adjusted his sights. A slight curve, the top of a sleeve, the hint of a rifle barrel. His pulse slowed. The world narrowed to one heartbeat, one breath, one pull. Then he stopped. Something felt wrong. The sleeve didn't move naturally. Too stiff, too still. A decoy. He smirked slightly, the faintest curl of his lip cracking frozen skin. Smart. His opponent wasn't reckless. He had set the bait perfectly. Just convincing enough to tempt a shot. Koenig leaned back, pulled his scarf tighter around his mouth and whispered, "Sehr gut. You've learned." The duel was no longer about elimination. It was about respect. By midday, both men had fired once. Both had missed. And both had learned something. The city between them, this frozen hell called Stalingrad, had become an arena for two philosophies. Viktor Antonov, the young Soviet marksman who fought with instinct and raw defiance, and Erich Koenig, the professional soldier, who believed in patience, precision, and inevitability. Yet even Koenig could feel the edges of doubt creeping in. He looked down at his rifle, its metal cold, its scope scratched by shrapnel, and wondered what any of it meant now. The Sixth Army was starving. Supplies had stopped coming. Men were freezing in their trenches, eating boiled leather and snow. Orders no longer sounded like victory. They sounded like denial. But Koenig followed them anyway. That's what soldiers did. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small photograph. A boy and a woman standing in front of a house near Leipzig. He touched the corner of the photo gently. His son would be 7 now. If he was still alive. For a moment the sound of distant artillery filled a void. The rumble was constant, like the growl of a dying giant. And beneath that, faintly, the echo of a rifle bolt sliding home. The Soviet was still out there, still waiting, still breathing. Koenig smiled grimly. This was no longer a hunt. It was a mirror. As night fell, the city turned blue with cold. Smoke drifted between ruined buildings like wandering ghosts. Neither man would sleep. They would lie in wait. Two predators circling the same silence. In a war of millions, they were fighting a war of two. Two philosophies. Two ideologies. Two human beings who, in another time, might have been students of the same craft. And when dawn came, one of them would stop breathing. The dawn came without light, just a grey mist crawling over the ruins of Stalingrad, thick as smoke, heavy as breath, the kind of morning that made men disappear. Viktor Antonov hadn't moved all night. He lay buried beneath a collapsed wall, wrapped in a dead man's greatcoat. The fabric still smelled faintly of gun oil and blood. He had pressed his face against the frozen concrete until even his heartbeat seemed to slow with the cities. Now, as faint light bled into the east, he knew his enemy was awake too. He could feel him. Every sniper developed that instinct eventually, the ability to sense when another set of eyes had found you, even from 100 meters away. It wasn't sound, it wasn't sight. It was pressure, invisible but real, like being stared at by the city itself. Viktor reached into his pocket and pulled out a small shard of glass, a piece from a shattered scope. He placed it carefully against the edge of the wall and angled it towards the street. The reflection caught the faintest sliver of movement, a glint. A reflection, tiny and sharp, like sunlight kissing steel. He almost smiled. The German was there, right where he'd guessed he'd be. "Got you," he whispered. But this time Viktor didn't fire. He'd learned from the first exchange, and from the silence that followed. The man across from him wasn't reckless. He was patient. He was calculating. So Viktor decided to play a different game. He crawled backward, inch by inch, until he reached the body beside him, a fallen Soviet machine gunner, frozen in a kneeling position. The soldier's helmet still rested on his head, cracked from shrapnel. Viktor gently removed it, brushing off the frost. Then he propped the helmet on the broken rifle barrel sticking from the rubble, just high enough to catch attention through a scope. He added a torn glove, positioned like a hand clutching the weapon. From the German's perspective, it would look like someone had shifted position. The trap was set. Across the ruins, Erich Koenig spotted the movement immediately. A helmet, a sleeve, a flash of dull red cloth. There. He steadied his rifle. His finger brushed the trigger guard. Cold metal against colder skin. Through the scope, he saw the faintest shimmer of breath mist rising. Or was it? He adjusted focus, 200 meters. The angle was strange, the figure half hidden behind a beam. It could be a ruse. It could also be real. Erich's heartbeat slowed to a rhythm he could control. He exhaled. Then, with mechanical precision, he squeezed the trigger. Crack! The bullet tore through the morning fog, striking the helmet dead center. It spun, clattered, fell. For a second, silence. Then, nothing. No scream, no movement. Only the faint whistle of wind through empty windows. Koenig's eyes narrowed. He'd seen that kind of silence before. It wasn't death, it was bait. A heartbeat later, he moved, rolled to his right. A shot rang out, sharp, echoing, violent. The brick where his head had been exploded into dust. Viktor had fired from the flank, not the front. He'd predicted Koenig's hesitation, his discipline. He'd forced him to shoot first and reveal his location. The duel was no longer about who could aim faster. It was about who could think faster. Koenig's training took over. He crawled deeper into the debris, reloading by touch. Each shell clicked into the chamber with the rhythm of survival. He whispered under his breath, "Gut gemacht, clever boy." Then he smiled, because now he knew where the Russian was too. For the next 6 hours they hunted each other through silence. No sound but distant artillery and the occasional creak of settling steel. Each waited for the other to make a mistake, a cough, a shadow, a reflection. Stalingrad became their chessboard. Each window, each crater, each corpse was a square to be played. But in this game, the pieces bled. By late afternoon, snow began to fall again. Thick, heavy, blinding. Visibility shrank to a few meters. Koenig adjusted his scope but saw only white. Then, through the veil, a shape moved, fast, low, deliberate. Victor. He fired once, missed. A second later, another shot, from the other side. Koenig felt the air move beside his ear. A close miss. Both men were breathing hard now, the cold tearing at their lungs. They fired again, both bullets passing within inches of the other. Then, silence. 2 rifles, 2 mines, 2 ghosts. Only one would leave the ruins alive. As the light faded, both snipers lay still, knowing the other was too close to escape. They were trapped in the same ruin, separated by only a few broken walls. The next move would be final. And somewhere deep inside, both understood the truth. That this wasn't about Germany or Russia anymore. It wasn't about orders or ideology or survival. It was about one shot. The perfect shot. The one that proved you existed, if only for a second, in a world determined to erase you. Night fell like ash over Stalingrad. No stars, no moon. Only the dying glow of distant fires reflecting off the snow. Inside the hollow remains of a factory, the air was heavy with smoke and frost. Somewhere among the twisted metal and bodies, Viktor Antonov and Erich Koenig lay within 50 meters of each other. Neither moved, neither spoke. They could hear the other's breathing, faint but real. Every creak of metal, every crunch of ice, every breath of wind against a broken wall. Each sound could mean death. Victor's hands trembled. Not from fear, from exhaustion. He'd been in position for almost 20 hours. His fingers were raw, his lips cracked and bleeding. His rifle felt like an extension of his bones, frozen and aching. He knew the German was close. Too close. One misstep, one scrape of boot or click of metal, and it would end. He tried to steady his breath. He thought of his mother's voice, of the Volga in summer, of anything but the man with the Mauser waiting somewhere in the dark. Across the ruin, Koenig was doing the same. He'd crawled into the skeleton of an overturned truck, using the rusted hull as cover. He'd lost track of time. Minutes bled into hours, hours into a lifetime. The cold had made him delirious. He saw shapes that weren't there, faces in the smoke. His son's eyes in the shattered glass beside him. He'd stopped believing he'd ever leave this place alive. But he couldn't stop hunting. It wasn't hate. It wasn't duty. It was habit. It was the only thing keeping him human. At midnight, the silence broke. A brick crumbled somewhere in the dark, soft, almost nothing. But to 2 trained snipers, it was thunder. Both men aimed at once. Both froze. Through the haze, through 2 scopes, 2 eyes found each other. Not targets, not enemies. Just men. Victor saw the faint glint of Koenig's scope across the beam, and behind it, eyes. Tired, blue, human. Koenig saw the same. A young face. Too young. Barely 20. Eyes full of fury and fear, but not hate. For a long moment neither fired. They simply stared. Two reflections of the same madness that had swallowed the world. Then, somewhere far away, a German shell exploded. The shockwave rattled the building. Dust and debris fell like snow. Both men flinched, just slightly. Koenig's finger tightened on the trigger. Victor's did too. A fraction of a second separated them, the smallest, most human hesitation. But the shot never came. Because in that heartbeat, both realized something horrifying and beautiful. They were already dead, not by bullet, not by shrapnel, but by everything this war had taken. Family, purpose, faith. All gone. All buried beneath the rubble around them. Koenig slowly lowered his rifle. He exhaled, the sound barely audible. Then, softly, in a hoarse whisper, he said in broken Russian, "Go." Victor blinked. He hadn't imagined it. The German's voice, cracked, tired, almost pleading. "Go," Koenig said again, this time in German. "This ends here." Victor hesitated. He could have fired. He should have fired. But something in that man's voice, the weight of surrender, of exhaustion, froze him. He slowly backed away, rifle still aimed, step by step into the shadows. Koenig didn't move, didn't aim, didn't even blink. And for the first time since the battle began, two snipers chose not to kill. By dawn, the factory was silent again. A patrol found Koenig slumped against the wall, his rifle across his lap, his eyes open but empty. He'd died sometime in the night, not from a wound, but from the cold, from fatigue, from the war itself. A week later, when the Red Army pushed forward, they found his body still there, untouched. Beside him, a single photograph lay in the snow. A woman, a child, and on the back, scrawled in faded, broken ink, a single word. Für meinen Sohn. Damit du nie sehen musst, was ich gesehen habe. For my son, so that you never see what I have seen. Victor never spoke of that night, not to his comrades, not even after the war. But sometimes, when he sat by the Volga in his old age, he'd raise a glass of vodka and whisper, "To the man who didn't shoot." Epilogue. The Silence of Stalingrad. Historians would call the Battle of Stalingrad a turning point, but for the few who survived it, it wasn't about strategy or glory. It was about ghosts. Two snipers, a German and a Russian, who met in the ruins and chose, for one brief moment, to be human again. In a city that devoured everything, their silence was the only victory left. The Volga was calm that morning. The ice had melted weeks ago, and sunlight shimmered on the water like ripples of glass. Children laughed somewhere on the far bank, chasing each other through the grass. Their voices echoed faintly against the rebuilt walls of Volgograd, the city once called Stalingrad. Viktor Antonov sat alone on a worn wooden bench near the river. He was 71 now. His hands shook when he poured the tea from his metal flask, but his eyes were still sharp, the same eyes that had once stared through a scope for days without blinking. He came here every year on the same day, the anniversary of the final German withdrawal. He never came for parades or speeches. He came for silence. The kind of silence only those who survived Stalingrad could understand. The city had changed. Shiny new buildings stood where entire districts had once burned. Tourists took photographs where corpses had frozen in snow. But Viktor could still see it. The old city beneath the new. The broken walls. The faces in the rubble. The ghosts that refused to leave. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box of matches. Inside was a photograph, faded and creased. A woman and a boy smiling in front of a house that wasn't Russian. German faces. He'd kept it for 50 years. He didn't know why he'd taken it from that body back then. Maybe to remember. Maybe to understand. In 1943, when the Red Army found Koenig's corpse, Viktor had stayed behind after the others moved on. He'd buried the man quietly, without ceremony, under a piece of twisted steel and snow. No one asked, no one cared. The war was too loud for one quiet death. But Viktor remembered. He remembered the blue eyes behind that scope, the tired whisper, "Go." And the strange mercy that had saved him, not from a bullet, but from becoming something worse. He spent years trying to forget it, years convincing himself the war had made him strong, but deep down he knew it had only made him empty. Now, 50 winters later, he came to that same place. The old factory was gone, replaced by a parking lot and a steel monument with engraved names. He walked to its edge, his cane tapping against the concrete, and stopped beside the plaque marked, "Here, brave men fought and fell for their motherland." No mention of the other brave men, the ones who fell on the wrong side of history, no space for them on the stone. But Viktor carried one name that history had forgotten. He knelt down slowly, his knees creaking, and whispered, "Erich." The word drifted into the wind, soft, almost sacred. He took the photograph from his pocket and placed it gently at the base of the monument. Then, using trembling fingers, he struck a match and lit a small candle beside it. The flame flickered uncertainly in the breeze, then steadied. A fragile light, just enough to keep the shadows back. As he rose, a young boy passing by stopped and looked up at him. "Were you in the war?" the boy asked, eyes wide. Viktor smiled faintly. "I was," he said. "Did you kill anyone?" Viktor hesitated. He looked out at the river, at the sunlight dancing on the water, and then back at the boy. "No," he said quietly. "I met someone who didn't." The boy frowned, not understanding, but Viktor didn't explain. Some things weren't meant to be explained, only remembered. He turned toward the river one last time. The wind carried the faint scent of spring, wet earth, birch, and smoke. He closed his eyes. For a moment he heard the city again, the whispers of the past, the crack of rifles, the voice in the dark saying, "Go." Then it faded, like snow melting into the river. Victor smiled. Not out of joy, but peace. The kind of peace that comes only after you've forgiven a world that never deserved it. Epilogue. The last shot. They say every sniper remembers his last shot. For Viktor Antonov, it wasn't one he fired. It was the one he never took. The one that saved his soul. And though time buried their names, the city remembered them both. Two ghosts of Stalingrad, forever facing each other in the silence between wars. When the snow falls on the Volga each winter, some say it's not snow at all. It's ash and memory.